At least 12 people are dead, many more injured. President Obama has just released a statement calling that shooting horrific while vowing U.S. support to track down the suspects who at this hour are still on the loose.
The Muslim population of France reached over 6 million people in the calendar year 2013. While they cannot legally collect technical and official stats about the race or religion of its citizens, the estimate would imply that almost 10% of the total population in France is now Muslim. And the people of France are becoming increasingly wary of a faith that has leaders pointing to the possibility of the entire nation becoming a Muslim country in less than one generation. So are we talking about Islamophobia, or reality of a changing world that simply cannot be stopped? Let's welcome back to MidPoint a man who understands the Islamic world better than most, professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida, and author of Salafism in Lebanon, From Apoliticism to Transnational Jihadism. Dr. Robert Rabil joins us again. Dr. Rabil, always
thank
a pleasure,
you, Ed.
my friend.
Always, it's my pleasure, and thank you for hosting me.
Good to see you. It is always a pleasure.
And I'm sorry to meet under this terrible circumstances.
But we have talked about this in the past, and we have prepared ourselves for this, and we have tried to, I think, bring some sanity to this. But with regard to the fact that this is an office that was the publisher of a Naked Muhammad cartoon back in 2011, we're now talking 3 years, 4 years later, don't we need to get it through our heads eventually? One thing, these people are patient, they will wait, they don't have to come after you right away, they're good at what they do.
You are absolutely right, because we have seen that not only in France, we have seen that in Denmark. Let's not forget 2005, 2006, you have scores of people were killed, you have places that were vandalized. We have seen it in Great Britain too, so it's not only in one place. And you are absolutely right, you have radical Muslims that wait for the opportune moment to go ahead and strike against what they consider, you know, those who blasphemed Islam by projecting the images of Muhammad.
But the blaspheme itself is rampant, because earlier in the show we played a clip of a cleric who was going after people who, for pictures, for internet, for video, for cartoon drawings, whatever it is. We need to understand that it doesn't make a difference. Almost anything you do can be taken as an insult by the radical members of this religion, and they will look to kill you for it.
As a matter of fact, I agree with you, and this is how I will put it in context. I believe that what happened today is a really attack on culture of the West, on the Western culture, on our, you know, what we believe in, mainly freedom of speech. Now, you have certain people that don't like to project those images. You have certain people that have reservation, but overall, this is all fall under freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and they had every right to do that. And those people who went in, they should be pursued, and they should be taken to justice.
When we talk about freedom of speech, isn't it fair to say that that is what the radical Islam faction fears most of all? They fear women speaking out, they fear young people speaking out, but there is that freedom of speech, and if they can shut that down any way possible, that's really the main goal. Not punish for something done religiously, but freedom of speech is the key.
Yes, I go along with you, and also I would add that, you know, you have certain images in Islam, or certain things in Islam they don't like to show, especially the picture of Prophet Muhammad. For them, this is like a high sin, like you have committed the biggest sin. And this is why you have some kind of a clash of culture between us and the culture of radical Muslims. And it's a problem. It's a big problem, Ed. It's a huge problem.
But how can you then get along with freedom of speech against what the radical Muslims want? It seems as if there is no middle ground. There is no compromise.
Okay, this is how I look at it. If you are living in the West, you have to go and abide by the culture of the West. If you don't like it, you know, you have to decide whether you are going to stay there or leave the West. If you are in the West, and I strongly believe that, and this is why I strongly believe now in Europe pursuing a policy that is mainly focused on assimilation of all its citizens, Muslim and non-Muslim, from different ethnic minorities from different parts of the world. If you want to live here, we have our culture. You have to assimilate. And our assimilation means respect to our laws and our culture and our traditions.
All right.
And this is extremely important. And with the radical Muslim, I strongly agree with you. What they have been doing is wrong. They are going to try to change things, not only in certain Muslim society, but also in the West.
All right, now where you're talking about, stand right there because that's
Yes.
a point I want to hit on when we come back. Break, we return with Dr. Robert Rabil to hone in not just what America, but other countries in the world refuse to do in order to find these killers, and that assimilation is a huge part of it. We're coming back right here on MidPoint. Welcome back to MidPoint. Professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Florida Atlantic University and the author of Salafism in Lebanon, a fascinating book. Dr. Robert Rabil joins us in the studio. We have now talked about this assimilation, if you will.
Yes.
But it seems that that's the biggest problem, because what happens is you have the radical Islamists, they do not want to assimilate, and the governments allow that. They propagate it. They push it forward. They say, it's okay, don't worry about it. That's fracturing society from the very core of society, and isn't that what's part of causing this problem? There's that schism that's there.
It's a big cause of what's causing this problem, and you are absolutely right, and let me highlight your points.
Please.
In France, for example, you have certain organization. I'll mention some, Jama'at al-Tabligh or certain Salafi organization that do not embrace violence, but their ideology is about supporting a very austere form of Islam. You know, so what they are creating now in France, in certain areas in France, in the banlieue, and where you have certain Muslims, those radical Muslims, those Salafi Muslims, they will say, listen, you are living here in France, but still you can live in Paris, in France, and still live according to our own views of society, mainly undergirded by their view of Islam. And this should not happen. So really, the French society and the French government, they have to be very careful with those radical Muslims, with the webinars, with the Salafi organization, that they are purveying, they are supporting this sub-society, which is separate from French society.
Then why are they supporting it? Is it political correctness or simply because they're scared to death?
All right, I wouldn't say now you are speaking about the French government.
Sure, any government for that matter, but
the French government does not support it. The French government, it faces some kind of a problem where they see that you have a number of Muslims, French, they have been alienated from the government or alienated from society. What they are going to do with them? Now, you have...
Kick them out. That's what some people would say.
Well, they are pursuing multiple channels, multiple ways of dealing with them. First, they say, listen, we want you to assimilate. We are having now certain affirmative action. For example, you go to Marseille. If you are a French of Algerian descent, you will have most likely, you know, a higher percentage of being hired. But on the other hand, they are not going, and this is where I agree with you, and clamping down on radical Muslims, on Salafi Muslims, on those mosques who distribute hatred literature. And you have them there. And more so, what is really a reflection of what's happening in French society, to have more than 1,300 French Muslims going to fight in Syria and Iraq.
Well, isn't it?
And this is really a reflection. They have a problem on their hand, and they have to deal with it. And it's very important to note, you have a lot. I went to Paris more than one time. As a matter of fact, Paris is the favorite city of my wife. And I go there, and I did some research there. You have many Muslims who are secular. You can deal with them, but also at the same time, you have certain Muslims who embrace certain ideas that don't sit well, absolutely don't sit well with Western culture.
Then haven't we reached the point, and this is what a lot of people continue to ask, where when you know these people are there, you know that they harbor radical beliefs, you know that they're going to be a problem. Look, we want everybody to come into our country. We want everybody to add to whatever we are. Yes. But if you don't want to add to it, if you don't want to assimilate, get out.
Well, let them get out.
I mean, and push them out. I mean, that's what people are saying. And I know you can't do that. I understand. But you've got to do something to stop the flood of radical Islam groups forming in these cities.
Yes, and this is why, and this is why they have to be extremely careful. What's going on in the mosque? What's going on in their society? What's going on now with webinars? What's going on with ISIS giving directives for Muslims? So really, this is why, by pursuing this two channel, one channel, okay, you assimilate great, you are welcome here. But on the other hand, you know, you have to respect our law and our culture.
And that's the biggest problem
And
here,
that's a
because
big-
the radical Islamists do not want to respect
Yes,
anything
and
that is
it's-
not what they believe.
And it's a big problem. And it's a big problem, especially now it's growing bigger and bigger with the growth of the Muslim community in Europe. Not only in France, but throughout Europe.
Everybody's just got
Now,
to get a
I
little
have-
harder edge. I got about 30 seconds left, but everybody's just got to get a little
Yes.
harder edged in this, don't they?
Yes, yes. I agree with that, and let me add something probably in a few seconds.
Please.
This is where Europe has to work really and enhance the security cooperation with the United States. Europe recently has been very sensitive regarding sharing personal data of European citizens with the US government. I think now this is a time where really the leadership of Europe and the leadership of United States, they work together and enhance one of the most important alliance called the Transatlantic Alliance that protects our Western culture. And Western civilization.
Continue to work together.
Yes.
Get rid of the fact you have to eventually, you got to
Take
cut
steps.
cancer out
I agree with you.
sooner or later. All right. I want to remind everybody
Sooner
once again,
better than later.
Sooner better than later. The book, once again, is Salafism in Lebanon. I read it. I read a chapter at a time, go back and read it again. It is a fascinatingly well-researched book. You need to read it to understand a little bit more about what's going on.
Thank you, Ed.
Always
It's my
a pleasure
pleasure
my
to
friend.
be here.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
It's a pleasure.
We'll see
It's
you
a
again
pleasure.
real soon.
Thank
All right, short break. We return with a brief respite from the Paris attacks and bring it home to America, where another battle is about to explode any day now, one that John Boehner had better be prepared for. On MidPoint.